Good morning. I'm Eric Noonan, CEO of Cybersheet Services International, and I'm thrilled to have you here at CMMC Con 2020, a virtual event. We've got people from around the country here at this event, and we're thrilled that you get to say that you're part of history. You were here at the first CMMC Con. Now, it's not quite like saying you were at Woodstock, but we still think it's pretty cool. We worked really hard to put a great agenda for you together today. We're going to answer really three key questions, right? What is CMMC, the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, and NIST 800-171? Why do we have CMMC and NIST 800-171? And then once we understand that, how do I get compliant with CMMC and NIST 800-171? If you're doing business with the Department of Defense, those compliance requirements are now mandatory and are standing in the way of all your future revenue with the Department of Defense. So they're critical questions to answer. And this entire agenda is helping our audience understand those three things: what, why, and how. So I don't want to stand in the way between you and the tremendous set of speakers and panelists that we have today. So let's get right to the agenda. Please enjoy the venue. Explore all the different parts of the venue that we've put together. You'll find information sprinkled throughout the venue, so make sure that you explore the entirety of the venue. Make sure you get your copy of your free ebook, CMMC Companion 2020. And of course, if you have any questions that aren't answered today, we'll provide you with many opportunities to reach out and answer those questions directly. So again, welcome to CMMC Con 2020. Make it a great day.
Thank you, Eric. It is now my pleasure to introduce Ms. Katie Arrington. She's the Chief Information Security Officer for Acquisition and Sustainment to the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment. More generally speaking, Ms. Arrington is a complete force of nature. Prior to being the driving force behind CMMC, she had an extensive career as a legislator and a senior cyber executive that includes 2 terms as a South Carolina state representative. Many of you have probably seen her in a webinar at some point over the last year and a half. So today, we wanted to do something a little bit different and hopefully a little more informative. Cybersheath is widely recognized as the leading managed CMMC compliance company. Cybersheath has experience that stretches all the way back to 2008, when all of this started as a voluntary pilot program. We thought it would be enlightening to marry that perspective with the transformational leadership that Ms. Arrington has provided in bringing CMMC into existence. We hope you enjoy this conversation between Cybersheath and Ms. Arrington.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm here with Katie Arrington, Chief Information Security Officer for Acquisition and Sustainment to the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment. Katie, thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for having me. From the confines of my home.
That's right, at an undisclosed location. Well, first, congratulations on your selection to the SES ranks. I don't expect that changes how you do your job, but from the outside looking in, feels like maybe that lends a little bit of permanency to this important effort.
It absolutely did. And that is the reason why they made the position in SES versus what I was prior in HQE, that they know this is an enduring capability and they need leadership to see it through over the FIDEP. So here I am.
Well, that's tremendous. And congratulations again. I'll tell you a short story here. I'll try and not make it too long. I was at Professional Services Council at one of those initial meetings over 18 months ago. And I remember first hearing you speak, and in full disclosure, I heard your energy and kind of fire and brimstone around this effort. And I thought, there is no way this is going to happen this quickly. And I'm thrilled to be standing here a little more than 18 months later. Obviously, you and your team have made a tremendous amount of progress. So what's your biggest win so far?
Oh, I would say biggest win has nothing to do with the program. It's the results of the program. When we first started this discussion in early 2019, we started at the same time the department started the DIBCAC assessments, which are the going out and auditing companies' compliance to the NIST special publication 800-171. When we first started doing those, the conversation about cyber really hadn't, I would say, had the full momentum it does now. And the scores were significantly lower than even we in the department had thought. And watching the course of the discussion and the collaboration with industry and, the C-suite understanding that this is important and it's going to matter, we have watched those scores go up significantly. Companies that were in the, doing maybe 80 to 90 controls now are doing, 109 with the POAM to do the 110th and have completed the additional 20 controls in level 3. So I see the biggest success is it was a journey that needed to be started, but we're already seeing the results. And we're already seeing the adversarial impact come down, not eliminated by a long shot, but that's the biggest success.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, really at the end of the day, and I think I've heard you say it many times, that it's not about compliance, really. It's not about a checklist. It's about kind of raising the bar, right? And becoming a harder target as a collective industry.
That is exactly it. And it's, understanding, this, I would say that critical thinking portion about cyber has been one of the main tenets of this, that it is not a checklist. And I would much rather go out with a solution that's about 90% and strive, continually have something to get better at, that 10%, that delta. And, I think we're really rocking in the right place, the trajectory. When the rule, the public comment period comes to an end at the end of November, and it goes into effect on December 1st, I think that's when we're really going to see the most significant impact in the fact that every vendor, every contractor, as they're going to contract award, will have to do a self-attestation and record it on the SPRS platform as we roll the CMMC out. So I think it's going to take it to a new level of critical thinking. And instead of just saying, yes, I have two-factor authentication, think to the critical thinking around, why do I need it? And what is the residual? And what's the return on investment? And if I don't have it on this platform or access, do I need it on another? And I would just say it's the dawn of a new day. Yeah,
I couldn't agree more. And submission to SPRS is going to bring a level of transparency that I don't think we've had before. And one of the things with that, if you were to put yourself on the other side of this equation, so you have experience having run a small business. Working with the DoD, you understand the space and the challenges. So if you were on kind of the other side of this effort, with all of these requirements for kind of the uninitiated and those who haven't made the stride so far, where would you start? What would your advice be to, a small business owner who is really, for good or for bad, just starting to learn about these requirements?
Oh, what a fantastic question. Nobody has ever asked me that. And I have an answer, or at least the Katie Arrington, when I was a contractor and a capture manager. So first, I would take the model that's out right now, on the CMMC website and the appendices, and I'd walk myself through. And I'll tell you where I did this, my experience, so you understand where I'm coming from. As a small business, prior to coming into the government, the one company that I was with, we were going through DIACAP and changing over to RMF. And that was going to be an investment that my company was going to have to make. And I would have to go to the board, I would have to go to the bank, I would have to develop my BMP, my PWIN on changing from DIACAP to RMF, and the investment that it would make that delta. Right. So the first thing I do is go down and go to the DoD website, download the model, and sit down with somebody in your company. If it's not you, the IT, CIO, CTO, the person that you're using for security, and walk through and see where you are. Then I would go to the DFARS rule. And the thing that I would look at is where, there are two things you need to do. A, what is your strategy where you want to see yourself in 5 years? What type of work do you want to be doing? And look at what type of work you're doing today and the requirements around it. Map out where you are in the model. Then look at your PWIN what you're looking out, 18 months, 2 years, 3 years down the line, and see where you think that work is going to fall. If it's CMMC level 1, if it's level 3. And here's an easy barometer for industry. For CUI, the DoD CUI.mil website is out. It has user guides, desk references to understand and identify what CUI is. Map that out, and then go back to the DFAR rule, and the pricing is in there, the costing, how much things will cost, because we're making security an allowable cost. So OMB OIRA had us run analysis, and you can actually see, what it would cost to have level 1 versus level 3. You can see the cost of the additional 20 controls annually. And I would map to say to yourself, for me to make the investment is going to be this much a year. You figure you're going to have to spend 6 months in going out and getting the tools together, or if it's going to be something you do as a service, or are you going to organically grow that capability within your company, map it out, what the FTE count, how many hours, et cetera, and then put it to your P-win. Does it increase your P-win? If it does, then that's, I would look at that as a benefit, but there's different tools on how to do this. If you're a sub or small and you're aligned with the prime, I would reach out to my prime and say, hey, are you looking at doing a CSP, a FedRAMP certified cloud instantiation for your small businesses to come in and do work that may require level 3, 4, or 5? If so, can we talk about that? And see how to position yourself. It's a very, very creative time for everyone right now, but the information's all there, and doing the aggregate is up to you as the business owner, or you working in the small business. It's all there. The tools, the templates were created with that mindset, that you could put the pieces together and make the decisions for your company based on where you are and where you want to be. And the P-win, because that's what really matters, right? Your win rate is going to be the gating factor.
Yeah, that's a very comprehensive answer. I appreciate that, because at the end of the day, it is a business investment and decision for business owners to make. And if there's not a business case there, certainly they're not going to make the investment. But if they want to be a part of this DoD supply chain and ecosystem, it's non-negotiable, right? They have to make the investment. And
and to that point, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I think you have to really stop and think about this beyond the DoD. We're willing to pay for it. We're willing to say security is an allowable cost. We want the cost. We're calling it out. Here's how much we think it's going to be. Build it into your rates. But I look at things like the National Cyber Solarium report. And if people aren't paying, don't know about that, don't worry about it. We'll tell you what it is. In 2019, I'm sorry, I had to think for a minute. The NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, required a study to be done, a commission to be stood up, and it's called the National Cyber Solarium. It's a bipartisan effort. This was not, one side of the house or the other. This was totally a bipartisan effort that went out and said, as a nation, what do we need to do to protect ourselves? In the information superhighway. I don't believe in coincidences. I think that everything happens at the right time and place. And if you think about it, we had the momentum of the CMMC long before COVID. The Solarium was done and the report out before COVID. But that confluence of how critical cybersecurity is to everyone, not just defense contractors, everyone. Our families are getting educated. We're working from home. We're getting our healthcare from our cyber capability. So that Solarium report was really, one of those things that's like, oh, wow, that happened at the right time. In that report, they said that the U.S. as a whole should have a national cybersecurity program for business. and that it should be built upon the DoD CMMC. And the part that really is impactful, if you go and download the report and you go to section 4, which is all about this cybersecurity program, and you go to section 4.4.4, it says that they want to amend, or they request, or I'm sorry, they suggest amending Sarbanes-Oxley to include cybersecurity reporting. So the big picture of this is that this is not just the DoD. This is how you do business. It's like having to get a business license. It's your cyber and how you're positioned, and your maturity and your capability is truly something that is evaluation criteria for your company. So I believe fully that it'll go beyond the DoD within the next few years. I think that it goes, well, I know it's going internationally because we set it up that way because our international partners, allied partners, have to get CMMC certified to do work on DoD contracts, just like any US contractor. So I just see this as more than just a DoD thing. It's a cultural shift for the nation to understand how critical cyber is.
Well, and you said it's bipartisan. We've seen it. I mean, the seeds of this were planted many years ago in a different administration, and they've now really taken off. And I want to take it back to something you mentioned. You mentioned cost, and you spoke on it pretty extensively. But there's been a lot of discussion on cost. Frankly, I think most of the discussion is hyperbole because every company in the supply chain is at a different stage of maturity. So the cost is specific to each company. So for me, it's a bit like asking how much a house costs. It depends. So putting specific figures aside, right? Is it accurate to say, and you said it earlier, I think, is that cost is now a reimbursable item, potentially a pass-through. That's transformational change. We haven't, I don't think, ever seen that before that I'm aware of. And, why haven't we heard more about that? It's a big win for defense contractors and national security.
Oh, so when I say that was one of the biggest, I would say, groundswells on that, right? When Ms. Lord, the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment, the Assistant Secretary for Acquisition, Mr. Fahey, all said without any reservation that security was foundational and that we should pay for it. So the whole model of the CMMC was something completely different than we had ever done. And the analysis behind it, to your point, every company is going to be a little bit different. These are, where we think that the pricing should align to, so we can do cost realism, so that the companies that may be doing it now are going to say, oh, well, I probably should adjust my rates, so on and so forth. But to get OMB OIRA in the rule change to actually understand and say, you're right, this is worth the return on investment to pay for this, to put it as an allowable cost because we will gain so much for it. So, that was groundbreaking. And the fact that they actually saw the rule as so impactful that it didn't come out as a proposed rule, it came out as an interim rule. And that was not on the DoD. That was on understanding that we really are at a critical point within our nation's history, and that we needed to get good now. There was no time to wait.
Yeah, it really truly tells you something about the urgency of it. And that's actually a great segue. So one of the things I wanted to talk to you about is that, we've been conducting assessments and delivering NIST 800-171 compliance as a managed service for over 5 years now. Back when it was really, you had a 2-year runtime up to 2017 to get compliant. But I hear it every day, still literally every day from business owners. Frankly, I'm not sure I actually have to do this yet. And in fairness to them, they've been hearing about unenforced compliance, for 5 years now. Everything's changed, but there's not always a recognition and a belief that this has changed now. And I think the way that rule came out actually greatly forwarded the mission of making people understand this is real now. But what would you say to all those companies, and there's a lot of them, who still aren't sure they're actually going to have to do anything?
So look at the rule. On December 1st, 2020, all new awards for the Department of Defense, all, with the exclusion of micro purchases under $10,000 and specific COTS products, you all need to go into the SPRS platform and do a self-assessment of where you are in the NIST applications today. That starts December 1st. The rule, if you look at the rule, it breaks into 3 different rules. And I say that's the crawl, the walk, and the run. The crawl is what December 1st, new contract awards, everyone has to go in and do a self-assessment and register it in SPRS. That's rule, and it breaks in 7012. So the DFAR rule today, if you Google it, DFAR 252.204.7012. If you Google that, you'll click on the link and it'll bring you to a DFAR, the rule for the Federal Registry. You'll see that it is open for public comment. We are looking for comments, so please put the comments in. Everything you think about the model or the pricing or put your comments in. It's when the government has to adjudicate them, so work on that. But it breaks it into 3. That first one is called, it's now Rule 7019 that says all new awards as of November 30th, 2020 have to have this self-assessment. The next part is Rule 7020 that states that once the self-assessment is done and logged, that if you have rated yourself high, medium to high, that the government will come and do an audit. And that is what we're using DIBCAC for. So DCNA, DIBCAP teams have been going out for 18 months now and doing assessments on companies' compliance to the NIST 171. So that's Rule 2, right? So it's saying Rule 1, everybody's got to go and self-attest. The second part of the rule is if you grade yourself a medium or high, the Department of Defense reserves the right. They're coming in to do an audit. And based upon those audits, they're going to take your assessment, what you've said, and they're going to map it to what they see. And they will work with you on corrective action reports to get that right. The last part of the rule is 7021. And that says, starting on November 30th, 2020, over the course of the next 5 years, we must impart the CMMC in every acquisition the Department of Defense has. Grants, SBIRs, STTRs, OTAs, everything. So this, and we're rolling it out. We've done the rollout program, how many we're going to be rolling out, when. What we haven't let is the actual requirements and the actual contract numbers and the primes, but know that we are deep into that here in the department. One of the factors we don't get to talk enough about is how, we've made this cultural move to make security foundational to the DIB. We've also done that internal to the government. We've redone the 5000 series. If you haven't seen it or you don't know what it is, it's actually how we provide instruction, guidance, and critical thinking to program managers, how to set up their acquisition. And we've broken it down. The original, the most recent 5000 was literally hundreds of pages of every rule every contractor ever broke. And they said, do not put yourself in a position where the contractor can do this. The new 5000, it's called the Adaptive Acquisition Framework. It's giving that critical thinking to the PM about what it is they're trying to create. They've created new pathways, the software acquisition pathway. But the main tenet that runs through all of the new adaptive acquisition framework is cybersecurity, because it cannot be traded off for cost, schedule, or performance. Because it doesn't matter if we deliver something at the cost or the performance capability or the schedule that we agreed to when we signed on the dotted line. If 4 years later and we go to delivery, the adversary has it and it's been compromised, or the like capability has been exfilled and the adversary has the like or has out innovated the capability, what does it matter? So we've made these big cultural shifts on both sides because it's so critically important. So know that the time is now. There is no time to wait. And if you're not doing at least CMMC level 1, I don't mean to sound trite, but why are you in business? If you don't have the wherewithal to change your passwords on your devices, and you're not thinking about that, I don't think I'd want to do business with you. Those are just basic things. The CMMC level 1 is basic. It's no cost other than the actual assessment itself.
And I think that's a great point. And the light speed at which we've gotten there, where, I mean, cybersecurity being foundational, I mean, frankly, it seems like it would have been intuitive, but it wasn't. And it is now. It's a foundational capability, and it's just table stakes if you want to be in the Department of Defense supply chain. So given that, is the actual decision as to what level? Obviously, companies need to make a determination. They can go out and they can look at the framework and they can understand, as you said, look at your business plan. Where do you want to be? But ultimately, is it the individual contracting officer who, on that RFP or RFI that has the discretion to determine what level is going to be required for a contract award?
So no. Funny you asked that. We actually have something called the critical technology list here in the Department of Defense. We actually have a defined list of things that we want to have the highest and most security on, and things that we, that are in a lower tier. Not to say they're not important, but we're not going to spend a great deal of money because we feel that they may have been compromised, or the return on investment for the security itself does not come back. So no, the contracting officer will not be the one to make that decision. It will actually be done as the RFP is created with the PM and the acquisition strategy. It will be in Section C and Section L. So unless otherwise stated, contracts will only require CMMC level 1. That's first. So unless otherwise stated in Section C and L, it's level 1. In Section C and L, we'll actually call out the requirement that will require level 3, or 4, or 5. So we're going to be working that long before the contracting officer. And because we, went about this, we asked the community of interest last year, 14 months ago. We had an RFI out. We did an industry day. Many people came to it. Many companies submitted, nonprofits. What we were looking for was to understand what the market had as far as a nonprofit that we could turn the model over to, and that they could be the third party to go and create the testing capability, the training capability, and the actual accreditation of the auditors. That is now what we know as the CMMC AB. So we've been down this road for a minute, and you just think about where we've come, right? 14 months ago to today. So get ready. It's happening. My biggest concern on the rollout, and I'm diverging a moment here, is making sure that I have enough assessors in the geographical area for the assessments as we roll these pilot programs out. That's my one, because even though we developed in the heat of COVID, the training, a portion of the level 3 has to be done actually on site And in the times of COVID, traveling, and how we do, social distancing, making sure we're taking the right precautions, that's my biggest concern, making sure I have enough people geographically located to do assessments on the programs we're rolling out.
That's a big logistical challenge. And, you mentioned the CMMCAB and some of the training, and I'll say, and I don't know how much exposure you've had to it, but we put a number of people through the registered provider training as part of being potentially onboarded as a registered provider organization. And the training was phenomenal. I say it every chance I get. I mean, it was actually very comprehensive, very in-depth, and a lot of the questions that you kind of see, it's almost a shame that it can't be public, some of the training, and maybe it will be at some point, but a lot of the questions you see in the press and some of the things that seem unanswered have actually been answered in the training, at least in our experience.
I appreciate you saying that. I will say I smile at that. Unless you've been in it every day, you don't understand the complexity of all that has gone into getting where we are currently. I do appreciate that. I will say it again. If anybody has any concern, the people that have volunteered to create the AB, make it stand it up, create the charter, become a 501c3, all volunteer to create this. I'm in awe. And my shop here, I wouldn't be, I'm the mouthpiece. I will say that the blunt force, just the people that have been, from day one, Buddy Dees, Dr. John Choi, Stacy Bosgenic, Lorraine de Blasio, Dawn, there are so many people that really are working day and night to get this done for our national security, because it's the right thing. It's, nothing's going to be perfect. We're culturally trained, the way we've been, functioning is we're risk adverse. Nobody takes a risk. If it's not 100%, and there's no 100%, but we go with that mindset. If it's not 100%, we shouldn't do it. And this was a group that, of seasoned professionals that we said as a department, as a nation, lean in, take risk.
Yeah, and look, we've been on the receiving end of seeing some of this training, and just judging by the output and the quality of it, we were very impressed. And it's necessary. I mean, national security sometimes get bandied around a lot, and sometimes can lose its meaning because it's used so much. But in this case, certainly justified. And I wanted to share. You talked about some assessment data earlier from DIBCAC audits, and so just wanted to share some data with you and just potentially get your reaction. So we've been doing audits, for more than 8 years now. And back when this was a voluntary collection of about 53 controls, continuing up through 800, 171, now it's CMMC. And so we've seen our own scoring data, and we've got a lot of it. And obviously the best you can do is 110, and the worst is a negative 203. So let me get your reaction. And
we've actually seen those.
Yeah, well, we have too. And so then you won't be surprised at these numbers. But I thought it was important to, with some anonymity, share this with the audience. So, a mid-sized management consulting and professional services firm, a 1 out of 110. A mid-sized research and development firm in the defense and intel space, a negative 62 out of 110. A manufacturer in the electric warfare space, a negative 172 out of 110. Do these scores surprise you? And isn't this really why CMMC needs to be compulsory?
Absolutely. Well, number one, they don't surprise me. And I don't think it's by malice, right? And I don't think industry intentionally missed a beat. I think that understanding and getting the critical thinking behind cybersecurity is something that we are learning as a collective. I'm not shocked at all. And the whole point of the CMMC, the whole point of what the NIST 800-53, 800, 171, the NIST standard on the cyber security framework, all of those are great guides of what is the standard, what you should do. It's hard for a small business to, I would say, ingest that and execute that. That bridge gap, I went through it. And as a small business, I can tell you, when even now, my husband owns a small business, and I practice what I preach. I've taken the model home. I've taken the assessment guides home. I've walked myself through because I was the architect to my husband's security at his firm, and I graded myself. And I'll tell you, in January of 2019, when I started to do it, he probably was on a 80, 85. And when I actually sat through and went through all the controls, it was only then when I actually stopped to think about it and said, am I doing this? Am I doing that? Should I do this? Can I do that? That's when I got the awakening. And a lot of the model, when we created it with industry, with people like you, and thank you for being there at the beginning. Thank you for going through and signing up and working through the provisional training. But it was translating that guide, the NIST standard, into English was a big part of it. And helping get a guidebook that's out for the public to consume now. It's been out since January, on how each of those controls or processes translates into, and I say English, and then it translates into business, so that companies and individuals can understand what the control means. Because if you're not IT savvy or you're not cyber savvy, you may not understand everything. So that was a big part of it. I mean, people like you that I say, one of my another very big passion I have is that we don't teach children how to code, when we should be teaching them how to code at the same time we teach them how to read, because it's the driver, right? It's how we communicate. So if you're not organically grown up in this environment, or you went to school from it, you necessarily wouldn't understand it. And if you're you're a service provider, and it's not something that you take, you're not creating something, you may not be aware. So I think that was a huge point. And I commend, industry mainly, right, for coming in and saying, that's not how we interpret that, or in the rule, the way you've laid that out, that's not executable. I think that's been a big push with the CMMC, and people like you that have been doing this for a minute, right? That you've been working on the NIST and you've been working on helping companies get compliant. Something that is auditable. The thing that the NIST is really not auditable, because there's no NIST certification that you can obtain. You can have someone come and review your compliance to the NIST, but there's no, I'm good and here's my audit to prove it. So the original question was, no, I'm not shocked. The numbers were low. I've watched them go up, but know that we are not done. And that whatever the model looks like today, I pray it doesn't look like this in 5 years. I pray that, we get that understanding of threat, that we communicate threat, that threat is not a four-letter word, that we communicate what threat looks like, and that we can adapt and move forward, and we change the protocols in which we are all getting hit so that we can all benefit from it. That's one of the big tenets of this is, you look at passwords, right? So are passwords going to become obsolete within 5 years? In some, maybe. Some capacities, maybe. And do we need to change that in the model? Is the adversary coming at us in a new and different way? I look at the thought of what happens when, quantum computing becomes commercially available. What does that mean for encryption? And how are we going to be able to adapt the model to that? You think about 5G and what that will do. There are so many things that are going to be changing in our environment so quickly. And to have something that we can come back and say, like a driver's license test, that's what I equate the CMMC to. It's your risk reduction strategy and knowledge of it for the information superhighway. Hopefully, 5 years from now, we're modifying it. We've come back and, we've said that the adversary is changing their tactic because we're in electronic warfare. And if you understand anything about it, it changes. And what you have today, you'll fill one hole and the adversary will find another. And we have to be prepared and think about it in that manner.
I think that's so important. You mentioned the model. You mentioned a couple of things I want to touch on there that I think are super important. So the model, I think in and of itself, and the fact that it is a maturity model, it is so important. So, there's, seen a lot of product vendors out there, in claims about, CMMC compliance and just buy this widget. And clearly there's no product on earth that can meet all 110, 130, depending where you are, controls, because it's not all technology in the model. And so much of the model is really about process of maturity within CMMC. It's not really all about technology, is it?
Absolutely. I mean, the critical thinking is the number one thing, right? And you don't wake up, as human beings, you don't wake up one day and you're not born speaking English or speaking at all. You don't even technically see at birth. You learn, you build maturity, your senses become aware. You create risk reduction strategies for existence. And that's based on maturity. So absolutely, this is, you start off with the basic stuff, you build on top of it, and you will continually build. And as your network or your architecture changes, if your firm is buying or selling other entities and you have to bring them in, I want you to start thinking and asking yourself, I'm putting a new printer on my network. Well, what does that mean? And how safe is that printer? And is there anything that I'm printing on that if I'm connecting it to the internet, am I protected that the adversary can't get it? And by adversary, I don't necessarily mean China or Russia. You have to remember there's always competition, and you have to think about that. Am I protected? How do I know what's going on once I hit the send button? And those are the type of critical thinking you need to take into consideration. How are you positioned to protect the information? And by information, I mean the individual, your PII, as a company, your IP, but for the individual, the IP as well. I mean, you look at a developer and a software developer, and they're brilliant, right? But the best thing that a developer has is their brain and how they critically think about developing a product. So I just think that this is a huge effort that's going to take 5 years to get into place. But then, where we'll be on that side. And then what next? If we get everyone certified, then what?
I've seen how far you and your team behind you have come here in 18 months. So I'm not betting against 5 years. I'll take the under. You mentioned something that I think is important. I think it's been important to this effort for a long time is kind of the tone, right? You said that it hasn't been for malice that businesses haven't gone and done this. And I agree completely. A lot of times they didn't grow up with the technology. They weren't aware of the requirement. They weren't aware of the threat. There's a lot of good reasons and I think the tone has been, hey, we're in this together, but this has to happen. So do you think, given that, tying back to SPRS, SPRS, Supplier Performance Risk System, is that now an opportunity, one, to force some transparency and really, frankly, prove what we already know, self-attestation didn't work? And how might it be used by the DoD to discriminate in source selection?
So it's a go, no go factor, right? So it's not, that was a big thing that we couldn't make it, if you were a level 3 and your competitor was a level 4, you get the award for being a level 3. We had to say, no, this is the requirement that you need to meet. Whether you're above it or below it, it has no value, right? So in source selection, it's not the level of certification. It's, do you meet the requirement? And that's a go, no go decision, period. and that was one of the things that we really, it was a struggle for some acquisition professionals to get their arms around that. We weren't going to make it a source selection. It's like ISO, right? If you're in manufacturing and the requirement in the contract is you're ISO 9000 certified, it's not asking you, are you ISO 9000 certified with a gold star and you haven't had any accidents in 274 days? No, it just says you're ISO certified, period, end of story. That's what we needed to go. So it's not going to be a discriminator in that regard. And plus the government is only going to be able to pay in the rate what we need. We're not going to pay for companies that we don't need level 5 on. I mean, that's very expensive. We appreciate a company wanting to do it, but the government can't, unless we're requiring it. You doing it is a business decision on your behalf, not on the government. So that needs to be out there. And we really want companies to do all that they can and to be secure and to lead the charge and make those business decisions, but know that the government only has so many dollars. And that's a big thing. Think about our defense budget. $750 billion, I think, last year. Ms. Lord has the oversight and authority over $350 billion. The studies, they vary around, but about $600 billion a year out of the US is lost due to cyber espionage, IP, data rights lost, et cetera, ransomware. The cost of the CMMC to the Department of Defense, if I can just get the majority of the companies to actually first change their passwords and do a truly critical thinking, password registry where you log it in somewhere in your company, not on a computer, and that you maintain some sort of, compliance to changing those, like you change your batteries in your smoke alarm. You should set a cadence for doing it. If I can get companies to actually, impart and actually execute two-factor authentication. And lastly, if I can get the whole of government, us and our partners, to appropriately mark the data and ensure that the proper data goes down the waterfall of the supply chain, instead of just shooting it all out there and not realizing you're putting a small business or a subcontractor at risk for sending them information that they weren't protected. They weren't set up to handle, and the adversarial impacts on that one. So if we could get the basic stuff done, we're going to save way more than the model is actually costing us. And then if you think about it, right, a rising tide raises all boats. Our industrial base is 300,000 plus companies in the United States. In one way or another, you daisy chain the supply chain. I think you'd be hard pressed to find a company that doesn't have some kind of connectivity to the Department of Defense. And if we're willing to say that's how the mechanism to get, the funding to get it done right, then that's how it's going to get done. But it's definitely something to think about as we've come this far and getting over the hill right now of, okay, we got to do it. It's okay. And getting the right resources to help companies get there, right? So you and your firm, you've put people through the provisional training and are working to get that. We in the Department of Defense, we've set up tools and platforms to help companies, individuals get good. So we've got to get to good. Project Spectrum, if you Google that, projectspectrum.ic, that's the Office of Small Business here in the Department of Defense that has created cyber tools, cyber awareness training to help with that. The PTACs, the Professional Technical Assistance Centers, there are 179 of them around the country. They're coming through and they're helping small business get to good. And then, reaching out to your Small Business Administration. They're partners with us too on this. And all of these different resources are there to help companies bridge that gap. And I would say pay attention to the NDAA. It's in conference right now. There are sections in the NDAA that have grant programs set up to help companies. So we want to help people get there. It's a crawl, walk, and run, but companies like yourself and people that have been out there for a minute saying this is important. The self-assessments don't work. When I got dressed this morning, I thought everything was good, and I'm fidgeting because my back is hurting because the belt I'm wearing. So self-assessments don't always work, and you have to think about that. You need someone else's viewpoint to help you make sure that you're compliant. So that's the whole purpose of the CMMC.
Yeah, and it's very much true. And I think one of the things another, again, I think kind of unsung portion of both this program and across the government generally is that we've really seen a whole of government approach on this between all the different agencies around the communication, the willingness to work with industry. You mentioned some grant programs. I mean, there's just a lot going on. Sometimes, frankly, that's part of the challenge for business owners to figure out, okay, where do I go to get what resources? But it really has been a whole of government approach. And I think that we've seen it. We've really seen customers where they do some business with the government, maybe even specifically the DoD, but they have a large commercial business and they've looked at these controls and over a period of time said, I'm not saying that we're going to do CMMC level X across our whole company, but these just are good hygiene. And I think some of these things we need to have across the entirety of our company. And we've seen that on, largely commercial enterprises who aren't directly part of the DoD supply chain, other than one small part of their business. So that's been very encouraging for us.
So I'll second that. You look at HIPAA, you look at FINRA. If you're in the healthcare sector or the financial sector, they have cyber standards. How do we know? If you're a doctor's office, and you want to get into a provider network, a Accenture, a Cerner, an Epic, you don't just plug into their network, right? There's a whole series of requirements and security protocols you go through to get to good, so that they're aware that you have the tools and the maturity to protect the combined interest that is on the information superhighway. So it is a whole of government approach. I think that one of the things, I'm the DoD representative on the Federal Acquisition Security Council, which is chaired by, OMB chairs it, but it's DHS and us. And what are the best practices for security of our acquisitions across the whole of government? So, they've been very active in the discussion on the CMMC. If you look at DHS CSA's ICT of supply chain, they have 6 different things that you should do to secure your supply chain. The first one is define the standard that everyone has to meet. Have a third-party audit of that standard. That is, I joke around, but it's Sweden, right? A third party comes in and audits and verify that standard has been met by that third party. They're speaking about the CMMC. The Department of Defense is a little bit different. Department of Energy has a C2M2, which is a lot like the CMMC, but it's voluntary. The CMMC by DoD standards it's mandatory for contract awards. That's why we went through the whole process. So know that the whole of government is very supportive of it. It's just understanding the Department of Defense has a buying power that supersedes any other federal agency. We're, like I mentioned, we buy $350 billion worth of product from our industrial base every year. And that's just in acquisitions and sustainment. That's not, what we do with paying our military or healthcare, right? So know that it's a big chunk.
It's why I think we've seen the progress we have so quickly. And I have a couple final questions for you I want to make sure we get to. So on that point, and I think why we've made so much progress so quickly, because as you said, the buying power. So it's been a very active 18 plus months, right? CMMC, DFARS rules, CMMC AB. Frankly, it's the fastest I've ever seen anything move in this community. I remember back in 2008, 2009, we were getting threat information products from DC3, FedEx. We didn't even have an electronic capability yet. So the pace has been incredible. And so do you think the pace of communication and outreach continues moving forward now that we have the new rule? And because part of my fear, frankly, is that the rule's out. We don't want companies to go to sleep until 2025 and be misinformed that they actually have 5 years. How do we prevent that from happening?
Well, events like this, right, where we communicate. The key to success in anything is communication, and communication. Making sure that our acquisition community understands the requirement is going to be essential, right? Educating them as much as educating industry, that's going to be key. And then I'm going to say that as companies go through this and they start seeing it in their bids, I think it'll take a whole new approach and the momentum will be maintained. Because right now, if you have a contract that you're awarded or you're due to be awarded between now and November 30th, there may not be any cyber requirement for the next 5 years. So we need to keep this momentum up. Part of the whole of what we're doing, there are more things that are happening. I think that we have a tremendous effort going with DevSecOps or DevOps. How we're going to look at that, we have a Department of Defense Digital Service in the Department of Defense. We have Air Force and Navy and Army leading DevSecOps in a lot of different areas. I think one of the things that may be around the corner is a maturity of a developer. Like, how do you know the developer is building in the DevSecOps environment, that they're doing it appropriately? How do you do the checks and balances? How do you gauge the maturity of that? And then I think another thing that'll come along very, very soon is industrial control systems. I think that, it's going to be a constant knocking on industry's door and saying, hey, we got to fix these problems. We need to work on this. So I don't think it's a one and done. I think the CMMC starts something that's much bigger than just cybersecurity. It's about foreign ownership. It's about supply chain illumination. It's about knowing what risk is, how to do risk mitigation strategies. So there's a lot more to come. This is just the start.
So final question, Katie. You spend a lot of your time evangelizing and answering, not asking questions. So at least in these forums. So let me give you the opportunity here. What would you ask of us, industry, vendors, kind of the DoD constituents? How can we best move forward? How can we best support this effort?
So one of my moments, and I know I'm going to go a bit over here, but I'll say it. One of my favorite things in life is that nobody ever told me to ask a question was wrong, and that no question is not worthy of being asked. And industry, you are our national defense. We in the department, we get appropriations, we negotiate contracts, we write requirements and programs, but you are the thing that's keeping our democracy alive. You are our national defense. So my one ask is never not question what we're doing. Please, that's, this is my sign-offs are one team, one fight. So don't be afraid to ask questions, and no question is not relevant. They all are.
That's
so please
great.
Ask.
Thank you so much, Katie Arrington. Very generous with your time. I greatly appreciate you participating today.
Thank you for leaning in. Thank you for taking the time. The fact that you're creating this access for everybody, right? And it's not a thing, right? It's not just doesn't happen that you take the time to be concerned about your nation and the warfighter to put in on this. My thanks are to you. And remember that I work for you, the U.S. taxpayer. This is about us. The Department of Defense is not a black hole of money, right? It's our money. It's our national defense. And one team, one fight. Stay positive, test negative, and be kind.
Thanks so much, Katie. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye.
Well, that was a tremendous conversation. Thank you both, Eric and Ms. Arrington. And a reminder to those of you watching, if you'd like to join the conversation, you can follow along with us on Twitter at #CMMC Con. After the break, we'll get to a guest session that makes this event different. We'll spend some time on the why behind CMMC. So much of the discussion around cybersecurity revolves around blocking and tackling specific controls or legislative initiatives. But what about the reason we're doing all of this? What about the threat? Our next guest might have you rethinking just how urgent this problem is. That's coming up.